Hey guys, what's up? Today we'll be starting our Satyam Academy Constitution of India lectures. Today we'll be talking about the preamble and its related concepts. So, the preamble of India, it says that we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. So, the words "We the people of India" tell us about the source of authority or power of the preamble and the Constitution. The words sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic tell us about the nature of the Indian state. The words republic, justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity tell us about the objectives of the Constitution and what it intends to do. And it also gives us the date of enactment of the Constitution, which is the 26th day of November 1949. So if we break apart the preamble, the word "we" tells us about the people or us and how we are the source of power. It also tells us about how we are writing this constitution for ourselves, governing our lives. And this is the noble vision envisaged in the preamble and further in accordance with provisions outlined in the rest of the constitution. Next, the word sovereign. The word sovereign basically means independent of any foreign entity. This also applies to the UNO and Commonwealth, and this means that India, being part of the UNO and the Commonwealth, has no effect on its sovereignty. The word sovereign also gives India the power to acquire foreign territories and also give up its own territories. The word also gives each state its own sovereignty, which is called internal sovereignty, and this gives them sovereignty in their internal affairs, and it also has external sovereignty, which is India's sovereignty in international affairs. Next, the word socialism. This was added as part of the 42nd Amendment Act in 1976. Socialism was already embedded in the constitution in the form of Part 4, which is the directive principles of the state policy. Now, when you talk about socialism, the first thing that comes to mind is the community owning all of the production and all of that, but India follows a special type of socialism called democratic socialism, which is in contrast to state socialism or communistic socialism, and it attempts to do this by the democratic process rather than the revolutionary process. The economic liberation policy of 1991 diluted the socialist credentials of the Indian state. We'll get to that later. Next, the word secular. So, in Western secularism, in countries like the USA, secularism is a negative concept and it connotes a complete separation between the religion and the politics. So, in Western countries such as the USA, the politics, which is the government, does not interfere in the matters of the religion, which is the church. But the Indian constitution embodies the positive concept of secularism, and it gives equal respect to all religions and it protects all religions equally. And because of India's diversity, the government will interfere into the matters of religion because India is very diverse. And this was made explicit in the preamble as part of the 42nd Amendment Act in 1976. This is the same Amendment Act that brought the word socialist into the preamble. However, the secularism is already embedded in the Constitution in the fundamental rights, which is Part 3 of the Constitution, in Article 25 to 30 and 44, which is the Uniform Civil Code. The word secular, when it was introduced, also abolished the separate electorate / the communal representation in legislatures. The 1909, 1919, and 1935 Acts provided for communal representation. So what this means is that because of the 1909, 1919, and 1935 Acts for communal representation, there was always a certain number of reserved seats for different religions in India, but because of the word secular, which means giving equal respect to all religions, this was abolished because it would contradict the fact that it was secular. The words democratic republic next. So democratic, as many of you already know, is power to the people and how people elect their own leaders. And this is of two types. there is direct and representative or indirect. So we'll get into detail on this later, but a representative or indirect democracy is again of two types, which is parliamentary and presidential. India also embraces social democracy in the form of directive principles of state policy and public welfare, and the prime minister is the head of the state in a parliamentary democracy, and the president in the presidential form. So in a representative democracy, like in India, the people elect representatives who are the MPs who elect their leader, who is the prime minister. But in the um, presidential indirect democracy, the people elect their representatives who are the senators, and they also elect their own president, who is the president. And republic, the president, indirectly elected by the people, is the head of the state in the case of a republic. So a republic in general is a state where the head of the state, who is the president, is indirectly elected by the people. So next we have equality, which says that two likes should not be treated alike, and we have justice, which says that two unlikes should not be treated alike. So if you look at the picture here, in equality you have three people and they are raised to the same status in the form of a crate at the bottom, and this is equality where you treat everyone equally. But in justice, you try and deliver the same level of how can I explain this? So you try and give them the same amount of rights to get everyone to the same state instead of treating everyone equally. So in equality, in the preamble, it says that it will give every citizen equality of status, and this is equality before the law, which is Article 14. The prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth, which is Article 15. And the abolition of untouchability, which is Article 17, and the abolition of titles, which is Article 18. It also says that it will secure to all its citizens equality of opportunity, and the equality of opportunity in matters of public employment, which is like government jobs. This is Article 16, and no citizen shall, on the grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence, or any of them, be ineligible for or discriminated against in respect of any employment or office under the state. So in government jobs, the government cannot discriminate people on the grounds of all of these. This is except the reservations made for justice by state for SC, ST, backward classes, and minorities. So SCs, STs, and backward classes and minorities are an exception for this. So justice, it's of three types: social, economical, and political. So social justice, this says that the state is to ensure the socially backward sections of society and minorities to be on par with the socially advanced sections and majority of the society. So it says that socially backward sections such as SCs, STs, and BCs, they should be raised to the same status as socially advanced sections of the society. So an example of this is the reservations for SCs, STs, BCs, and minorities in employment and education. So this raises SCs, STs, and BCs to the same level as socially advanced sections. Next we have economical justice. This says that the state is to ensure that economically weaker sections such as women, poor, and illiterates also be able to earn on par with the rich. So an example of this is equal pay for equal labor for men and women, welfare programs for poor people such as the NREGA, and old people such as the pension. Next we have political justice. So political justice is mainly all the citizens should have equal voting rights irrespective of sex, religion, caste, or region. Example, this is the universal adult franchise for the women and poor. Next we have liberty. The preamble says that it will secure to all its citizens the liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. So liberty in the preamble is elaborated in the preamble, and it is very essential for the successful functioning of the Indian democratic system. It was embedded in the constitution as part of the right to freedom and fundamental rights, which is Article 19. And the liberty conceived by the preamble or fundamental rights is not absolute but qualified. So it's not absolute, you can't have it, it's qualified, so there's some conditions to it. Next we have the word fraternity. The preamble says that it will secure to all its citizens fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Fraternity means a sense of brotherhood, so that's the main definition. It's a sense of brotherhood, and the Constitution promotes this feeling of fraternity by the system of a single citizenship. So if you're a citizen of India, you can't be a citizen of any other country. And the word integrity has been added to the preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. This is the same Amendment Act that put the words secular and socialism into the preamble. And this integrity implies both psychological and territorial dimensions of national integration. So it means so the integrity implies both psychological, which means that all Indians are one, and territorial dimensions of national integration, which means all the territories of India are together. So Article 1 of the Constitution describes India as a union of states. The states have no right to secede from the union. Like I said, this it ties in with the integrity, which implies the territorial dimensions of national integration, and this means that once a state is part of India, it can never go out of India. It will always be part of the Indian state. So next, we have some key concepts and some questions on the preamble. So how should the preamble be envisioned or visualized? So the preamble contains the source of the power, nature, and polity of the state and its objectives. It is the soul of the Constitution, and it outlines the noble vision of the founding fathers of the Constitution. So it gives us a peek into the minds of the makers of the Constitution. And further, the preamble of the Constitution should be perceived as the key to the minds of the makers of the Constitution. So what can the preamble be used for? The preamble can be used for interpretation of ambiguity. Some assistance at interpretation may be taken from the objectives enshrined in the preamble, where the terms used in any article are ambiguous or capable of more than one meaning. So if you read the Constitution, there's many laws, there's many articles, which are very vague and ambiguous. But the preamble, it gives you a concise description of the Constitution, so you can refer to the preamble for key judgments. And the third question is the preamble a part of the Constitution? So yes, the preamble is a part of the Constitution, but it does not grant power or limitations or prohibitions. In the Birubari Union case, the Supreme Court said that the preamble is not a part of the Constitution, but later in the case 1 and the Bharti case, it agreed and said the preamble is part of the Constitution. Next, we have, can the preamble be amended? So as we've already seen, the preamble can be amended. In the Birubari Union case, the Supreme Court said that the preamble cannot be amended, but in 1973, the Supreme Court said that the preamble can be amended as long as it will not affect the basic structure of the Constitution. So you can amend the preamble, but you can't change any of the basic features of it. So you can't take out the paragraph which says fraternity, or you can't take out the paragraph which says equality. You have to keep them in, but you can amend small things. So how many times was the preamble amended so far? So the preamble has only amended once so far, in 1976 by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, which added 3 new words which we've discussed: socialist, secular, and integrity. So how can we see the popular definition of democracy be understood? So democracy, it is generally defined as government for the people, by the people, and of the people. So if we break this down, the government of the people, the common people are elected as the executive and legislatures to rule and make the law. Executive and legislature are composed of ordinary citizens of state. So the government is made by the people, and it is of the people, because any common man can become a prime minister in India. Government by the people. Executive and legislatures are elected by the people through direct or indirect way of election through a universal adult franchise. So government by the people says that us, the people, we elect the government, we control the government. And last, government for the people. The elected government is responsible for the safeguarding the fundamental rights as well as welfare of all the people or citizens across the state. So government for the people says that whatever government we have elected, it will function for the people and function for the welfare of all the citizens of India. So next, we have what constitutes the basic structure of the Constitution. So we've already seen that if you want to amend the preamble, you cannot change the basic features. The basic structure is in the case 1 and the Bharti case. a 13 judges constitutional bench of Honorable Supreme Court held that preamble of the Constitution is an aid in the constitutional interpretation. The preamble is meant to embody in every view to well define the key to understanding of the Constitution. It was further held for Chief Justice Sikri that the basic structure of the Constitution consists of republican and democratic form of government, secular character of the Constitution, separation of powers between legislature, executive, and the judiciary, federal character of the Constitution, and dignity and freedom of the individual. So these five features they cannot be amended in the Constitution, and they are the republican and democratic form. So we've talked about this: the indirect, the parliamentary democracy, and the republic, which is India. This cannot be amended. So you cannot change, if you come to power, you cannot change the form of government. So you can't change India from a parliamentary democracy to a presidential democracy. You cannot change the secular character of the Constitution. So you cannot abolish secularism. You cannot merge the legislature, which is the assemblies, the executive, which is the prime minister and president, and the judiciary, which is the Supreme Court. You cannot change the federal character of the Constitution, and you cannot take away the dignity and freedom of the individual. Next, we have about democracy. India is said to embrace democratic socialism and social democracy. Is there any difference between these two? If so, what do you think? What do you think? Which one does Indian polity is closely associated with? So we've already seen that democracy is of two types: democratic socialism and social democracy. So democratic socialism, it is anti-capitalist and intends mainly towards the social ownership of the means of production. So this is like your normal socialism, which means that all of the country's production are held by the people and they are distributed equally to bridge the gap between the rich and poor. But it differs from the communistic socialism only that in the democratic process it follows to only that in the democratic process. So we use a democratic process to run this socialism, and it follows to achieve this by the social ownership of means of production by means of nationalization of assets such as the nationalization of banks and land acquisition. So the society does own all the properties and production rights, but it's not like communistic socialism where the government owns everything and it splits between everyone. The government owns everything, but it nationalizes everything, so everything is property of the government, and it delivers its services to the people equally. And in the case of a social democracy is not anti-capitalist, so it has capitalism in it, and it makes a peaceful coexistence with capitalism and tends to take the advantage of it to drive the socialism. So when you have a socialism or a communistic socialism mainly, the economy of a country cannot move forward because there is no production excess, and you cannot get more production. All the production is split equally between the people. And when you have capitalism, the economy tends to move forward, right? So in a social democracy where there is capitalism, the government takes money from the capitalists and it distributes it among the poor people to achieve justice. So if you go back to the justice part, you can see that in this picture you have the three people and the crates. So for example, if this person is the capitalist, it takes money from the capitalist and it distributes it to the weaker sections so they can come to the same level in society. So that is social democracy. And so there is a difference between these two concepts, and India was more of a democratic socialist country until the economical reforms policy was implemented in the 1990s. The nature of Indian polity has changed to more of a social democracy since then. So we talked about this before, the 1991 new economic liberation policy. What this said is that instead of a socialist country, India would start introducing capitalism into the country, which started the form of social democracy. Next, we have direct democracy and how it works, how it is different from indirect democracy. So Switzerland is the only country in the world which has the direct democracy, and what this means is the Switzerland electorate, which is the country of Switzerland, it elects the leaders directly, and these leaders, if they form a law, any Swiss citizen, they can challenge the law and they can vote on whether the law whether the bill will become the law or not. So if the Switzerland elected, they first elect 6,000 people, I think. Uh, so they elect a number of people which form the government, and that government, when they propose a bill, the Swiss electorate can vote whether the bill will become a law or not. So every single bill introduced by the government, which is called the Swiss Confederation, the people will vote on it to see whether it will become a bill, law or not. So unlike in the indirect system, the citizens may challenge any law voted by the Federal Assembly. So if a bill becomes a law, any citizen can challenge it. In India, only the MPs can challenge a law, and they can vote, and only the MPs can vote on a law. But in Switzerland, every single citizen may challenge a law. And after 4 years, citizens of Switzerland vote to elect 200 members to the National Council, which is similar to the Lok Sabha, and 6 members constitute the executive branch, that is the Federal Council of Switzerland, similar to the cabinet. The members of the Federal Council are from the 4 top parties in the country, and this greatly helps in forming a stable government. Each of these members lead a federal department or ministry. The country's 7 departments are finances, economy and education, internal affairs, defense and sports, energy, traffic and environment, and justice. On a rotation basis, one of these executives will act as the president of the Swiss Confederation, with a ceremonial role only to represent the country in the international affairs. So what this means is that every 4 years, the citizens of Switzerland will elect 200 members into the National Council, which is like the government, and from these 200 people, 6 people from the 4 top parties in the country, they will form the Federal Council, which is like the cabinet ministers, and these 6 will take care of the 7 departments, which is finances, economy and education, internal affairs, defense and sports, and all that. And on a rotation basis, because these are from the 4 top parties, there will not be any accusing or anything. Everything will be peaceful, and on a rotation basis, one of these executives will become the president. But like a monarchy, like the UK, the president has no power. They're only there to attend foreign conferences and stuff like that. And Switzerland, unlike many other European states, the country's citizens are at the pinnacle of power and does not have a president or a prime minister. Sure, they have a president, but they don't play any role in the government. So next, presidential democracy and parliamentary democracy. We've already talked about this, and we already know that the USA is an example of the presidential form of democracy. And there's differences between the presidential form and the parliamentary form. So the similarities are similarly to the parliamentary type in presidential democracy, there are 3 branches of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary. The executive branch consists of the president and the secretary of state, which are the ministers in India's case. The legislature branch consists of the Congress, which is parliament in the case of India, which will further have the House of Representatives, equivalent to Lok Sabha, and the Senate, equivalent to the Rajya Sabha. And 3, the judicial branch consists of the Supreme Court. So so in the executive branch, it's like India. They still have the president and the secretaries of state, and in the case of India, the secretary of state are merely just called the ministers. The legislative branch consists of Congress, which should not be confused with the Congress party. The Congress is the House of Representatives, which is the United States Lok Sabha, and the Senate, which is United States Rajya Sabha. These both form the Congress, which is like the House of Parliament. And another similarity is in both the countries, the judicial branch is called the Supreme Court, and there is differences between these two as well. So presidential democracy and parliamentary democracy mainly differs on how the head of executive is elected. We already talked about this. In the presidential democracy, the people elect their representatives and their leaders at the same time, and the people do it directly. In the case of a parliamentary, the people elect their representatives, and the representatives then elect their leader, which is the prime minister. Another thing is, unlike in India, the president in the US is not just a nominal head. He has veto power on any bills that legislature passes and send for his sign. So in India's case, the legislature makes a law, so the ruling party, which is the prime minister's party, they propose a law in the Lok Sabha, and then it goes to the Rajya Sabha for review, and then it goes to the president for signing. And if the president signs the bill, it will become a law. But if the president does not sign it, he sends it back to the Lok Sabha, then it will go through again. And when it gets to the president the second time, he has to sign it. It's compulsory. But in the US, it's not like that. So the legislature makes the law. That's a similarity. In any case, the Congress makes the law, or the Congress or the Parliament makes the law. So the legislature makes the law. They send it to the upper house, which is the Senate. They review the law, and when they send it to the president, he can either sign it or not sign it. And if he doesn't sign it, it goes back again. But the second time, he does not need to sign it. He has the power to veto the law. So that concludes our lecture on the preamble, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.